What was it like stepping into the studio for the first time with the band on the Prelude Implicit?
Uh, it came time to do my first vocal track. And Phil comes into the room and, he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, look, have fun with this, relax, have a good time, do the best you can. Just totally put it out of your mind that there's 2.4 million Kansas fans waiting for this right now. Gee, thanks, Phil. No pressure, So, but it's recording that album was intense. We just totally took over the entire studio in the separate rooms, and Rags would be in his room working on violin parts, and David Mannion at the time, he was in Studio B. We took the entire month of January off, and I think the first 2 weeks of February. So we had blocked out a total 6 weeks where we were not going to do any shows. It was just recording that album. The difference with the absence of presence, we were in the middle of touring. We tried to block out August and just be in the studio for August, but Keith, our agent, called Phil and said, hey, we got a good deal here. You don't want to pass this one up, the call of the road is there. And of course, you need to keep your cash flow going. So it was very intense with the absence of presence to be recording that album and then also going out and doing in gigs. It really, wow, it was high pressure. It really was.
And that's a great album, and I'd love to touch on it a bit. What was the thought process going into that record?
With the TPI, the Prelude Implicit being the first album that Kansas did in, what was it, 15, 16, 17 years, there was just such you could tell, and the kudos really go to Phil and Rich here. Talk about a band that has such a huge library of music to fall back on. Kansas doesn't need to do new music. There's still songs. I'm in the band 7.5 years now. There's still old Kansas songs I want to play that we haven't even touched on, So to add more original stuff to the library is just amazing. So I think it was just, it's part of keeping the ball rolling, of keeping things fresh. And like I said, kudos to Phil and Rich, who've been doing this for now nearly 50, did I say 50? 50 years, to have that hunger to still put out new music. It's really an amazing thing. I think it's just what they been doing their entire life, and to have such a long span without putting out anything new. Maybe they wanted to, or felt a little stagnant and wanted to do something new, because it re-energizes you.
Do you think was there maybe some tone or mood or theme that you guys wanted to hit with that album?
No, it's not a preconceived thing. It's every song, when you have the basic foundation, you start with that, but as you add stuff and you think of a part and you add it, get added, and it starts to take on a life of its own. So it's not like a preconceived end game where, okay, this song needs to be this. It doesn't work that way, at least not in Kansas. It kind of takes on its own life. The hardest thing is, when do you end? When do you stop adding parts? When are you satisfied with the song at that particular point to move on to the next one? I think that's the toughest thing, because I mean, even now when I think about I play a little bass myself, and I was talking to Phil not too long ago. I'm like, God, I was listening to the song Refugee the other day. To me, in my producer mind, think, God, that song is screaming for fretless bass. Fretless bass, So even after the song's recorded, we're still coming up with ideas that, God, that would have been great in this song. And you just kind of like log it in the back of your mind, and for future songs, for future projects.
And the thing about Kansas music is its complexity, which kind of goes with a lot of prog rock anyway. But in some ways, it's almost orchestral in that. And the funny thing is I don't know if I appreciated it as much from the albums themselves until I actually saw you guys for the first time live. When you see the band live and you hear the band live and all the different elements, and then you add the violin, and there's a lot of complexities to it. So I mean, I can see how you go. It's kind of like painting a picture. You go, when am I done? You know what I mean? When you're probably writing a song, right?
Probably the biggest compliment that I hear is after a show, I'm walking out, or I see a few times. And to me, it's the biggest compliment when I hear someone go, God, I wasn't expecting it to be that good. They were just, God, the musicianship was just so good. And that's one thing I love about this band, is the diversity of the music. Sure, there's stuff that's really prog, but when you go back into the old library, you hear stuff that's very straight ahead, has a very 4/4 rock and roll, gosh, commercial, commercial appeal. I mean, uh, between Dust in the Wind and Throwing Mountains, you couldn't come up with two completely different songs, but Kansas hits everything in between. And that's really the most fantastic thing to me, because it really it gives you an open palette of, you're not being pressured from a record company to go, oh, this song was a hit, you need to write 5 more songs like this one. That would never happen in Kansas.
And you've been with the band, like you said, a while now. What have you learned about each band member, musically, and what does each band member bring to the table, whether it be live or in the studio? I'm going to give you the opportunity to I guess praise everybody and plug everybody there.
Well, right off the bat, number one, my fellow bandmates are all perfectionists. And it's something how before every show, every date that we do, we're rehearsing. This band does not stop drilling. Even stuff that we've, miracles out of nowhere. We still drill that song in the rehearsal room. Everyone is really perfectionists and really at a high level of musicianship. So that's what I mean, it really is amazing. But I mean, Phil is an absolute perfectionist. Rich Williams, and when we were recording TPI, the Prelude Implicit, I remember being in the studio. We were in the lounge of the studio, and Rich is playing with an acoustic guitar. I've been around a few guitar players in my time, and Rich would come up with the most unique, I don't know how to describe it, just extremely unique. I'm like, gosh, where did that come from? I never heard anybody play something like that. His choice of chords were just so imaginative. He's really underrated. And then Billy's bass, perfectionist. Billy's singing, perfectionist. And then of course, David Ragsdale, which his violin, it's so funny. sometimes I'll be watching Rags and forget what I'm doing on stage because he's a mesmerizing player. And I could see the audience just focusing.
Yeah, it's just
It's like when Rags does one of his solos, I'm just looking at the audience focus on him, and he will just hypnotize you with his violin. And then now having Tom in the band, we call him the boy with the golden resume. Being Meatloaf's keyboard player. He was Debbie Harry's keyboard player. He toured with Yes. Really? You tour with Yes? You're playing Rick Wakeman stuff, Tony Kaye stuff. You're no slouch if you're doing that. And not only is Tom an amazing player, he's an amazing sound designer, amazing writer. The song The River Sang, the song that we do live now that he sings, just intensity, super prog, and he's a super prog guy, and it's such a challenge and great stuff. But that's the band as a whole. It's a band of perfectionists that have never relaxed. It's from day one of me being in the band, this band does not stop rehearsing. And I don't think people realize that. But the other perspective too is, it's so funny when I hear, oh my God, Kansas, they're such a serious band. I picture them being such serious guys. Are you kidding? This band never stops telling jokes, never stops laughing, making fun of stuff. When you spend this much, you have to amuse yourself, and we do a very good job of that. So it's a lot of fun.
Ronnie, we've got to go on a quick commercial break, pay the bills. Can you stick around to the other side?
Absolutely. I'm here. Let's come back.